September 12th, 1944. Eastern France, near the German border. The forest was dark. Not just dark, but the kind of darkness that swallows sound. That makes you question if your eyes are even open. The trees stood like black sentinels, ancient oaks and pines, their branches tangled overhead, blocking out even the faintest starlight. On the forest floor, the smell of rotting leaves mixed with something else: cordite, gunpowder, death. The war had passed through here weeks ago, leaving behind shell craters, abandoned equipment, and graves that no one had time to dig properly. In a muddy foxhole, barely 3 feet deep, a 19-year-old American private sat completely still. His name was Vernon Joseph McGarity, but everyone called him Baker. Baker from Tennessee. Baker who'd never fired his rifle at another human being. Baker, who 3 weeks ago had been loading flour sacks in his uncle's bakery in a town so small it didn't appear on most maps. Now he sat in occupied territory 50 yards from a dirt road, holding a rifle with trembling hands. His uniform was soaked, not from rain, from sweat. Because in exactly 14 minutes, Vernon Baker was going to do something that would make his commanding officer scream at him for 20 straight minutes. He was going to disobey a direct order. Not just ignore it. Not just bend it. He was going to look at that order, an order given by a captain, approved by a colonel, backed by the entire United States Army chain of command, and he was going to say, no. And then he was going to set up an ambush. An ambush that headquarters had explicitly forbidden. An ambush that, according to every tactical manual, every officer training course, every lesson learned from 3 years of brutal combat, was tactically insane. Because Vernon Baker, a private with 11 days of combat experience, was about to attempt something that veteran sergeants said was impossible. He was going to capture an entire German company. Not kill them, not scatter them, capture them. 187 German soldiers, without firing a single shot, using nothing but 2 ropes, 2 trees, a white bedsheet, and the kind of audacity that gets you either court-martialed or awarded the Medal of Honor. This is the story of the greatest against orders ambush in World War II. The story the Army tried to classify for 40 years. The story that one German officer, decades later, would call the most terrifying moment of my life, because we never saw the trap until it was too late. This is Vernon Baker's story, and it starts not in France, but in a place you've never heard of. Right outside Tennessee. That's not a description. That's the name of the town. Right outside. Population 47. Located in Carter County, tucked into the Appalachian foothills, surrounded by tobacco farms and logging camps and churches with hand-painted signs. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody, where the general store doubled as the post office, where Friday night entertainment was sitting on the porch, watching fireflies. Vernon Joseph McGarity was born there on August 6, 1925. His daddy, Joseph McGarity, ran a small lumber mill, cutting timber from the surrounding hills, processing it into boards, selling it to construction companies in Knoxville. Back-breaking work. Dangerous work. Joseph had lost 2 fingers to a saw blade when Vernon was 7. Just wrapped the stumps in a rag, took a slug of whiskey, and went back to work. Vernon's mama, Clara, worked the family tobacco farm, 5 acres, just enough to scrape by. She'd wake up at 4 a.m., work the fields until noon, then cook, clean, mend clothes, can vegetables, and collapse into bed at 9 p.m. Vernon was the youngest of 6 children, 4 brothers, James, Robert, William, and Thomas. One sister, Mary. They lived in a 3-room cabin with a tin roof. No electricity, no running water, outhouse in the back. In winter, they heated the cabin with a wood stove. Vernon and his brothers would take turns waking up every 2 hours to feed the fire so it wouldn't go out. In summer, they slept on the porch because the cabin was too hot. But Vernon didn't think of himself as poor, because everyone in right outside was poor. That was just life. What Vernon did have was the woods, the endless Appalachian forest that stretched in every direction, miles and miles of oak and hickory and pine. From the time Vernon could walk, his older brothers took him hunting. They taught him how to move silently through the brush, how to read animal tracks, how to judge distance without a rangefinder, how to wait perfectly still for hours until the deer came. By age 10, Vernon could track a wounded rabbit through dense undergrowth in the dark. By age 12, he could tell what kind of animal had passed by just by studying broken twigs and disturbed leaves. His brother James used to joke, Vernon could track a ghost through a snowstorm. But it wasn't magic. It was patience, the ability to sit still, to watch, to wait for the right moment. When Vernon turned 14, his daddy's lumber mill burned down. Electrical fire. Started in the middle of the night. By the time anyone noticed, the whole building was engulfed. Joseph McGarrity stood in the street, watching his livelihood turn to ash, and didn't say a word. The family had no insurance, no savings, no backup plan. Vernon's oldest brother, James, was already in the army. Robert had moved to Knoxville to work in a munitions factory. William and Thomas were trying to keep the tobacco farm running. Vernon was too young to work at the factory, too inexperienced to help with the farm machinery. So his Uncle Raymond, his mama's brother, offered him a job. Raymond McGarrity ran a small bakery in Elizabethton, about 12 miles away. Boy can work weekends, Raymond told Clara. I'll pay him $2 a week and feed him lunch. $2 a week was a fortune. So every Friday after school, Vernon would walk 12 miles to Elizabethton. He'd sleep on a cot in the back of the bakery, work Saturday and Sunday, walk home Monday morning in time for school. At first, the work was simple, sweeping floors, washing pans, hauling flour sacks. But Uncle Raymond saw something in Vernon. The boy was meticulous. He didn't just clean a pan. He scrubbed every corner until it gleamed. He didn't just stack flour sacks. He organized them by date, so the oldest got used first. After 3 months, Raymond started teaching Vernon how to bake. Baking, Raymond explained, ain't like cooking. Cooking, you can improvise. Add a pinch of this, a dash of that. But baking is chemistry. You mess up the ratios, the whole thing fails. Vernon learned to measure ingredients precisely, to judge oven temperature by how fast a piece of paper browned, to know, by touch, when dough had been kneaded enough. But the most important lesson came on a cold Saturday in January 1940. Vernon was making bread. He'd mixed the dough, kneaded it, shaped it into loaves, and was about to put it in the oven. Raymond stopped him. What's the hurry, boy? It's ready, Uncle Raymond. Is it? Raymond pressed his thumb into the dough. The indentation stayed. See that? Dough ain't risen enough. You put it in now, you'll get dense, heavy bread. Nobody'll buy it. But the recipe says 1 hour rise time. It's been an hour. Raymond smiled. Recipe's a guide, Vernon. But you gotta use your eyes, your hands, your instincts. Bread tells you when it's ready, You can't rush it. You gotta wait." Vernon stared at the dough. "How long?" "Until it's ready. Might be 10 more minutes. Might be 30. You watch. You wait. You trust your gut." Vernon waited. 22 minutes later, the dough had doubled in size. Airy, light. He baked it. Best bread he ever made. Raymond clapped him on the shoulder. "See, patience, boy. Patience is how you survive in this world." Vernon never forgot that lesson. 4 years later, in a foxhole in France, that lesson would save 187 lives. December 7th, 1941, Vernon was 16 years old, working at the bakery, when Uncle Raymond burst through the door holding a newspaper. "Vernon, the Japs just bombed Pearl Harbor." Vernon had never heard of Pearl Harbor. But over the next few days, as the radios blared and newspapers screamed headlines, he learned America was at war, and that meant Vernon's brothers were going. Robert enlisted in the Navy on December 10th. William joined the Army Air Corps on December 15th. Thomas tried to enlist, but was rejected. He had flat feet. And James was already in the Army. He'd joined in 1940. He was stationed at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, 3 miles from Pearl Harbor. For 2 weeks the family heard nothing. Vernon's mama would sit by the window every evening staring at the road, waiting for a telegram. On December 23rd, a telegram arrived. James was alive. Wounded, but alive. Shrapnel in his leg. He'd be shipped to a hospital in California for recovery. Clara McGarity collapsed in relief. But 6 months later, James was deployed to the Pacific. Guadalcanal, the jungles, the brutal, grinding campaign that chewed up entire divisions. On February 8th, 1943, another telegram arrived. This one was different. It began with the words, "The Secretary of War regrets to inform you, James McGarity, killed in action. February 5th, 1943, Guadalcanal." He was 22 years old. Vernon stood at the funeral in a borrowed suit that didn't fit, watching 6 soldiers fold the flag and hand it to his sobbing mother. He watched his father, who never cried, weep silently, shoulders shaking, and Vernon made a decision. That night he told his parents, "I'm joining up." His mother grabbed his arm. "You're only 17. "I'll be 18 in 6 months. Vernon, please. Mama, James is gone. Robert's on a ship somewhere in the Atlantic. William's flying bombers. I can't just sit here." His father looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. On August 7th, 1943, one day after Vernon's 18th birthday, he walked into the Army recruiting station in Elizabethton. The recruiter was a grizzled sergeant with 3 Purple Hearts pinned to his chest. "You know what you're signing up for, son?" "Yes, sir." "You might die." "My brother already did, sir. I figure I owe it to him to finish what he started." The sergeant stared at him. Then he handed Vernon a pen. "Welcome to the United States Army, Private McGarity." Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Fall, 1943. Basic training. Vernon arrived with 200 other recruits. Farm boys and city kids, loudmouths and quiet types, college graduates and 8th grade dropouts. The drill instructors didn't care who you were. They broke everyone down to nothing, then built you back up as a soldier. Vernon kept his head down, followed orders, didn't complain. He wasn't the fastest runner. There were track stars from big city high schools who left him in the dust. He wasn't the strongest. There were former factory workers and football players who could do twice as many push-ups. He wasn't the best shot. There were farm boys who'd been hunting since age 5, who could outshoot him on the rifle range. Vernon was just average, invisible, which was exactly how he liked it. But during a land navigation exercise in week 7, something changed. The exercise was simple. Each squad gets a map, a compass, and coordinates. Find the checkpoint in the woods. First squad back wins. Vernon's squad leader was a loudmouth from New Jersey named Ricky Palmieri. Ricky had been a Boy Scout. He assured everyone he knew how to read a map. 30 minutes into the exercise, they were hopelessly lost. "Palmieri, where the hell are we?" someone shouted. "I know where we are. We just gotta go. That way." They went that way for another hour. It started raining. The map turned to mush. Palmieri sat down on a log and put his head in his hands. "I don't know where we are." Silence. Then Vernon, who hadn't said a word the entire time, spoke up. "We're about 2 miles north of camp." Everyone turned. "How do you know?" Palmieri asked. Vernon pointed at a tree. "Moss grows thicker on the north side. We've been walking north this whole time. Should have been going south. So what do we do? Turn around, head south, watch for the creek. Creek runs east-west. When we hit it, we follow it west till we find the trail. Trail leads back to camp." Palmieri stared. "How do you know all that?" "Grew up in the woods." They followed Vernon's directions. 45 minutes later, they walked into camp, dead last, but they made it. The drill sergeant looked at them, muddy and exhausted. "Who navigated?" Palmieri pointed at Vernon. "McGarity did, Sergeant." The sergeant walked over to Vernon. "You read the map?" "Didn't need to, Sergeant. Just watched the trees." The sergeant almost smiled. "You got good instincts, McGarity. Don't lose them." August 31st, 1944. Vernon McGarity landed in France as part of the 35th Infantry Division, 134th Infantry Regiment, Company G. By then the war was supposedly winding down. Paris had been liberated. The Germans were retreating toward the Rhine. Everyone said it'd be over by Christmas. But when Company G reached the front lines near the Moselle River in eastern France, they found the Germans weren't retreating anymore. They were fortifying, digging trenches, building bunkers, laying minefields. The Wehrmacht had decided no further. Company G's mission was simple: patrol the forest roads, watch for German supply convoys, report enemy movements. Do not engage. Artillery would handle the killing. Infantry was just the eyes. On September 9th, Company G moved into position along a stretch of forest road the Germans used to resupply forward positions. Captain Raymond Hodges, Company G's commanding officer, was a West Point graduate. 29 years old, by the book, serious. He gathered the platoon leaders and laid out the mission. "We are in observation mode. You see Germans, you call it in. You do not fire unless fired upon. Artillery will destroy the convoys. Our job is to be invisible. Understood?" Everyone nodded. Company G spread out along 2 miles of forest, setting up camouflaged observation posts overlooking the road. Vernon's position was on the southern end. He shared a foxhole with Private Danny Kowalski, a 20-year-old from Chicago with a thick Polish accent and a motor mouth. Danny never shut up. "Man, this is boring. We're just gonna sit here and watch trucks go by. I didn't join the army to be a peeping Tom." Vernon didn't respond. He was studying the road. Single lane, dirt, narrow, trees on both sides pressing in close. "You listening to me, Baker?" "Yeah." "You think we'll see any action?" "Maybe." "I hope so. I'm tired of just sitting around." Vernon finally looked at him. "Danny, you ever been hunting?" "Nah, man, I'm from Chicago. We hunt pigeons. Vernon smiled slightly. Hunting's 90% waiting, 10% shooting. If you're bored, you're doing it right. Danny stared. That's depressing. For 3 days they watched the road. Nothing. No convoys, no patrols, nothing. By September 12th, Captain Hodges was getting impatient. Intel said they use this road every 3 days. Where the hell are they? On September 12th, 0200 hours. Vernon couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about those tire tracks he'd seen earlier. Fresh, deep. The Germans were using the road, just not when American observers were watching. He climbed out of the foxhole and crawled to the road again. This time he followed the tracks north. 50 yards up, he found something. Crushed cigarette butts, German brand, still fresh. Someone had stopped here. Recently, maybe 2 hours ago. Vernon's mind raced. They're running convoys at night. Small groups, no lights, fast. That's why we haven't seen them. He crawled back to the foxhole. Danny was snoring. Vernon shook him awake. Danny, wake up. What? What's happening? I need your help. With what? Vernon pulled out his trench knife. We're gonna set a trap. Vernon McGarity never received a Medal of Honor for the ambush. Officially, it never happened. The Army classified the after-action report. Marked it, need to know only. Because the report revealed something embarrassing. A 19-year-old private had captured 187 enemy soldiers using a tactic that contradicted every regulation in the book. If that got out, every private in the Army might start thinking they could ignore orders too. But Captain Hodges knew the truth. And 3 months later, when Vernon led an assault on a German machine gun nest and saved his entire platoon, Hodges made sure Vernon got the Medal of Honor for that action instead. Vernon went home in 1945, opened a bakery in Tennessee, married his high school sweetheart, had 4 kids. He never talked about the ambush, not to his wife, not to his kids, not to reporters who asked about his Medal of Honor. I just did my job, he'd say. In 1983, a German veteran named Klaus Richter tracked Vernon down. Klaus had been a lieutenant in that convoy. He flew to Tennessee, knocked on Vernon's door, and said in broken English, "You are the man who captured us?" Vernon nodded. Klaus grabbed his hand. "You saved my life. I have 6 children, 14 grandchildren. They exist because you chose mercy over bullets." Vernon died in 2013 at age 87. At his funeral, 23 German veterans attended, men whose lives Vernon had spared 69 years earlier. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't killing the enemy, it's giving them a reason to stop fighting. Vernon Baker understood that at 19 years old, and 187 men went home because of it.